provide instruction to the public about how they can access the interpretation. That'll be the first slide that we have.
That's the beauty of two accounts. You can keep interpretation on right now, and we can still speak with our other device.
All right, so Gavin, open us up as soon as you're ready.
There you go, they're coming.
All right.
I did want to mention really quickly, because I see you were recording. If you're recording and you have other people as co-host, it would also record their audio. Is that what you're meaning to do?
Yep, understood. The main channel will be recorded. Yep. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you. Hello and welcome, everybody. Have we got everybody in the room, Gavin, confirming that we are live and everybody's here?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So in that case, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. And I apologize for the delay. We were trying to figure out some things with our interpretation processes, and I think we got it all sorted. So thank you for your patience. Before we get started, I'd like to present some instructions for accessing the language interpretation for those who need it. To access Spanish or Hmong interpretation, select Interpretation and then select Spanish or Hmong. The interpreters will also translate for any of the Spanish or Hmong speaking community who wish to speak upon being called on by the facilitator. And I will now ask the Spanish and Hmong interpreters to come off of mute and provide instruction to our Spanish and Hmong participants as well. So if we can start with Emilia with our Spanish interpreter.
Hola, muy buenos días. Este es el segundo taller para las necesidades de la comunidad para el Plan de Acción Anual. Esta junta está siendo traducido simultáneamente en español. Para poder acceder a la interpretación, si está por computadora, seleccionará el icono del mundo y luego seleccionará el lenguaje español y poner en modo silencio el audio original. Si está por su teléfono, seleccionará los tres puntitos que significan más y seleccionará interpretación y lenguaje de español. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Emilia. And Laura, if you could provide the instruction to any Hmong participants who might be with us today.
Nhớ trong sẽ trả tón này sẽ là công bên tại lúc trong sĩ thẳng tại nó do hai tiếng này lên từ xã báo lu chạy ô lồng hông nó chỉ thọ nên cả trong tờ khó hai tiếng interpretation chỉ nhẹ lúc bỏ hai tiếng mong chỉ là mà lý cho nên một trò lưu hông và thầu tu mi cả hai lô anh kia của mà lưu mất sao lồng hông cho họ do hai tiếng này một lô đã chỉ nên mà lên nông của mà lưu mất nên cho lô chạy cho lô anh kia cho là thế có chân đâu.
Thank you. With that, then I will pause for just a few seconds for anybody who wishes to join the interpretation channels to get into the appropriate, to select the appropriate language for interpretation. And I'll note we also have our sign language interpreters here today as well. So thank you very much to Roz and Aaron. All right, we will go ahead and get started. So good afternoon again, and welcome to the 2021 to 2022 Annual Action Plan for HUD Community Planning and Development Funding. This is a community workshop. This is the second of the two workshops. We did one last night. This one does contain, it will have the same content and the same conversation. If you were in the workshop yesterday as well, though, we would absolutely appreciate any additional feedback that you have today. So thank you for joining. And with that, I'll give you some general procedures for Zoom to get us started. In the main room, all participants will be muted until they are called upon, at which point they may unmute their microphones. Also, participants' video will not be displayed during the meeting. To facilitate electronic access, we ask that you please do not speak until you're recognized by one of our facilitators. And if you would like to change your name on your account, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to change your name. If you have a question or would like to make a comment, click on the icon labeled Participants at the bottom center of your PC or Mac screen. At the bottom of the window on the right side of the screen, click on the icon labeled Raise Hand and your digital hand will then be raised. If you have a question or would like to make a comment and you've joined by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. So that's how you'll signal to us that you'd like to make a comment. And then once we call on you to unmute your phone, you will then need to press *6 to unmute your phone. Then you can make your comment. And once you've finished making your comment, please then press *6 again to mute your phone again, just so that we don't get any background noise. And with that, I will start with some introductions. In attendance today, we do have Thomas Gaffery. He's the Assistant Director for the Planning and Development Department. And from our Housing and Community Development Division, we have Manager Thomas Morgan and Administrative Manager Karen Jenks. And my name is Edward Chinevere. I'm a Senior Management Analyst with the Housing and Community Development Division, and I will be doing the presentation and leading today's conversation. And I should note, we also have, and we are very, very grateful to have, Gavin Haubelt, who is with our city's Information Services Department, and he'll be helping us out with today's technology. So thank you very much, Gavin. All right, today we will begin with a presentation that'll introduce the plan, the annual action plan, and the programs that we'll be discussing today. That includes a review of the city's 5-year plan priorities and goals. And then we'll discuss activities which we have used these particular funds to pay for in the past and are currently implementing, so that you can get an idea of how these funds can be spent. Then we'll head into a community discussion to discuss the activities that are most critically needed for the next year. And that's where we'll really be asking for your feedback. Then we'll come back together as a group to summarize the discussions we've had. And finally, we'll give you some information about how you can stay involved in the planning process and what to expect next. With that, I'll begin the presentation. So HUD CPD, you'll hear us refer quite frequently to HUD CPD, is the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Community Planning and Development Office. That's the federal organization that provides the funding that is the subject of today's conversation. The Office of Community Planning and Development seeks to develop viable communities by promoting integrated approaches that provide decent housing, a suitable living environment, and expand economic opportunities for low and moderate income persons. The primary means that they work toward this goal is the development of partnerships among all levels of government and the public and private sector, including for-profit and nonprofit organizations. In the next slides, we'll talk about how the city partners both with other units of government and local nonprofit organizations, as well as HUD CPD to meet these goals. The planning process begins with the consolidated plan, which is a 5-year plan that HUD requires the city to prepare. And that plan outlines the key goals and how the city will generally allocate the funds provided by HUD to the city over the term of the 5-year plan. The city completed the most recent 5-year plan last year. It was adopted in May of 2020. And then each year, the city applies for annual funding from HUD through an annual action plan, which describes how that year's funds will be used to meet the needs of the public and the priorities outlined in the 5-year consolidated plan. The activities which are approved for funding in that annual action plan are then completed by community-based organizations or the city itself or by other units of local government. So essentially either the city provides the services or projects or will partner with an organization, other unit of government, or in the case of affordable housing developers to complete the objectives of that project or service. As discussed on the previous slide, the activities that the city funds have to meet the goals of our 5-year plan, which we adopted last year. And there are 6 plan priorities, which we'll discuss briefly now. The first priority is to provide assistance for the homeless and those at risk of becoming homeless through safe, low-barrier shelter options, housing first collaborations, and associated supportive services. The city's 5-year goals in this category include providing rental assistance or rapid rehousing assistance for at least 900 homeless persons, and to provide overnight shelter or street outreach services for at least 2,500 persons. We should note here that the city will also, of course, try to implement approaches that exceed these goals. And the city also receives funding from other sources, which we anticipate will allow us to deliver more activities to address homelessness. But for the purposes of this presentation, these 5-year goals are just for the activities which are funded directly from the federal funding from HUD. We'll also discuss on an upcoming slide some of the activities and partners we've worked with in the past or are currently working with to help us meet these goals. And that'll be true of all of these priorities. We'll introduce the priorities, but then I'll give you some examples about how we're working to meet the goals of those priority areas. The next priority area is to improve access to affordable housing for low-income and special needs households by partnering with interested developers to increase development of low-income and affordable housing in high-opportunity areas, and by promoting the preservation and rehabilitation of existing affordable housing units. And I'll note, a high-opportunity area in the context of this priority is an area with access to quality jobs, quality education, and other things that improve quality of life. Those are high opportunity areas as defined by HUD. The city's goals over the 5-year period of affordable housing are to add at least 130 affordable rental units, add at least 50 new homes for low and moderate income home buyers, and to rehabilitate at least 220 homes owned by low and moderate income persons. The next priority area is to promote quality of life and neighborhood revitalization through improvements to current public infrastructure and facilities, and by closing gaps in areas with aging, lower quality, or non-existent public infrastructure and facilities. The 5-year goal here is to provide neighborhood infrastructure or public facility improvements in low and moderate income neighborhoods to benefit at least 50,000 persons. Examples of projects that meet these needs are street and sidewalk improvements in low and moderate income neighborhoods, or facility improvements at parks and recreational facilities, among others. The next priority is to provide services to low income and special needs households that develop human capital and improve quality of life. The services that we can use these funds to provide are very broad and include services for youth, seniors, health services, employment training services, childcare, drug abuse, education, energy conservation, or recreation. The 5-year goal here is to provide public services that directly benefit at least 11,300 low and moderate income persons. Also, as part of the public services priority area, the city has made a goal to provide technical assistance to low and moderate income entrepreneurs looking to start or expand their businesses within the city of Fresno, with a goal to assist at least 200 entrepreneurs. The final two goals are to provide services to residents and housing providers to advance fair housing, and we'll talk a bit about how we're currently doing that on an upcoming slide. And the final priority is to plan and administer funding for community development, housing, and homelessness activities with improved transparency, increased community involvement, and full compliance with federal regulations. This last goal is very important to us to make sure that we not only meet all of the necessary rules and regulations, but also that we plan for these projects in a way that involves the community as much as possible in a transparent and open way, which is really why we are here today. To give you a little more idea about how these funds can be used, we'll talk briefly about how we've used them in the past and how we're currently using them. And we'll start with a quick review of the activities which were completed last year, meaning the 12 months that ended on June 30th, 2020. In the homelessness category, emergency shelter and street outreach services were provided by Marjorie Mason Center and West Care. Tenant-based rental assistance programs, which you might hear us refer to as TBRA, were provided by Fresno Housing Authority and West Care, and homeless prevention services were provided by Turning Point of Central California and West Care as well. In total, more than 1,200 persons were assisted across all of the homeless and homelessness prevention programs funded by the city's federal funds. In community services, the Parks After School Recreation and Community Services Department operated the city's after-school program at 10 city park locations, including Ted C. Wills, Romaine, Quigley, Maxie L. Parks, Lafayette, Holmes, Frank H. Ball, Fink White, Einstein, and Dickey Youth Development Center. Enrichment programming provided for seniors 62 years of age and older to complement existing hot meal service was also provided at 7 locations, including Lafayette, Mariella Brown, Mosqueda, Pinedale, Senior Citizens Village, Inspiration Park, and the Ted C. Wills Community Center. The Boys and Girls Club of Fresno County utilized our funds to provide education, job training, and recreation for youth ages 6 to 18 at Fink White Park and at their West Fresno Community Center. Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission's Street Saints program operated in 3 community centers in Southwest Fresno, including Sunset Community Center, MLK Square Apartments, and Hacienda Mirabella Apartments. And helping others pursue excellences, Hope Builds Micro Enterprise Assistance Program provided 56 businesses with assistance. And altogether, community services activities benefited more than 2,400 low income and special needs persons. The city implemented owner-occupied housing rehabilitation programs during the year by providing funding to both its internal housing and community development divisions home repair programs, as well as by providing funding to 3 subrecipient partners, including Habitat for Humanity, Self-Help Enterprises, and Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission. Altogether, the city and its subrecipients assisted 98 households with home repair, senior paint programs, roof repair, minor code compliance, and housing rehabilitation programs. In the fall of 2020, developers who received funding from the City of Fresno's Home Investment Partnerships Program completed 2 large projects. 4 single-family homes were completed by Habitat for Humanity at their B and Amador, and 40 multifamily senior housing units were completed by Self-Help Enterprises Annandale Commons Development. Park facility improvements included Fink White Park, which received a new play structure, Holmes Park, which received funding for Americans with Disabilities Act remediation, Ted C. Wills Community Center, which received funding for various improvements, and Romaine Park, which received funding for improvements to doors and bathrooms. These projects combined benefited 43,320 residents. And the City of Fresno Public Works Department completed 2 roadway reconstruction projects utilizing federal funds during the year, including the Calwa, Vine, and MLK neighborhood and the Shields, Dakota, Crystal Hughes neighborhood. And those projects combined benefited 15,040 nearby residents. Both projects included pavement reconstruction, including removal of the existing pavement, reconstruction of each pavement section, and in addition, city crews were able to repair curb ramps and gutters for improved ADA accessibility and an overall neighborhood commute improvement. 2 nonprofit facilities received funding for facility improvements last year, which included the Marjorie Mason Center with a bathroom renovation and the West Care fire system upgrade. We'll now discuss briefly the activities that were funded for the current year, which the city and its subrecipients are currently implementing. We'll have less information about these because they're in flight, so we don't have accomplishments necessarily to report. But I think it's a great way to get a sense for how we might be able to spend these funds going forward. So the current year began on July 2020, and after we met with the community last winter, we used that input to develop a new 5-year plan, and we implemented the first year of that plan, or rather, I should say we are implementing the first year of that plan right now. Funding was set aside for at least 26 new affordable housing units, which will be developed in partnership with affordable housing developers. Project selection for that funding is currently underway. Housing rehabilitation programs also continue to receive funding to offer assistance to homeowners with low incomes to repair or rehabilitate their homes. In addition to the city's own rehabilitation program, Habitat for Humanity and self-help enterprises were also awarded funds to provide home repair and rehabilitation services. In total, 54 households are expected to benefit from repair and rehabilitation programs in the current year. The city's annual funding for homeless and homelessness prevention programs was awarded to Poverello House for their Homeless Outreach Progressive Engagement Program and for their Rapid Rehousing Program, as well as to West Care California Inc.'s Project Unite, which offers both rapid rehousing and homeless prevention services, and finally to the Fresno Housing Authority's Rental Assistance Program. Community services being funded include continued funding for after-school programs for youth from low and moderate income families at the same 10 neighborhood centers identified previously, and senior programs at 7 centers. Funding was also awarded to the Boys and Girls Club to provide education, job training, and recreation to youth at their east and west locations. Funding was provided to Stone Soup Fresno's Family Forward program, which connects adults with community resources and job training. And finally, the Fresno Area Hispanic Foundation's Womanpreneur program received funding for their program, which is designed to assist low-income women entrepreneurs establish and grow their businesses. I'll take a moment to note that all of these programs are operating in the current year, even though many have had to adapt their operations in light of the pandemic and continue to do so. The city is also funding fair housing services through Central California Legal Services, which will be providing outreach and education for tenants and landlords, especially with respect to the newer requirements that all landlords must accept housing choice vouchers. And the Community Housing Council of Fresno will be conducting a series of fair housing workshops, primarily, but not exclusively focused on home buyers and real estate and finance professionals. It will also be available to the general public. The city also funded 5 street improvement projects in low and moderate income neighborhoods, including street improvements for West Fresno Elementary and MLK neighborhood, and the Burroughs Elementary neighborhood. And 3 projects are multiple year projects that received first year funding in this current year. And those projects include a Yosemite street and sidewalk improvement projects in the Yosemite Middle School neighborhood, the Highway City neighborhood, and the Erickson Elementary neighborhood. Among other activities that were funded in prior years, which are still underway, are the multi-generational community center at Large Park on North Millbrook Avenue off Gettysburg, which will be a large new neighborhood center with park facility improvements, including a tot lot and sports fields. There is much, much more information about the prior year's activities and the current year's activities available on the city's website at www.fresno.gov/housing. But we really wanted to give you some highlights so you can get a sense of what has been done, and what is possible with this funding. I'll also note that there is information on the website about one-time funds, special funds that were provided by HUD to address the coronavirus, as well as information about the new state entitlement program called the Permanent Local Housing Allocation. While today's conversation is about the HUD funds, the HUD annual funds that are offered, allocated in that annual action plan, if you express needs that can be met with one of these other funding sources or another funding source that we're aware of, we will make sure to pass that information to the appropriate team. So how about next year's funding? That's where we are really asking for your help today. For next year, we expect to receive a similar amount of funds as we did in the previous year, which totals to about $11.5 million across the 4 federal programs. We'll note that if you are a member of a community organization interested in applying for some of these funds, each has very different requirements and regulations, and we are here to help, and we encourage you to reach out. We'll have many options for you to do that toward the end of the presentation. With that, let's go over the expectations for the community discussion, and then I'll pause briefly in case anybody has any questions. For the community discussion, our host Gavin will separate us into separate breakout rooms for a 50-minute discussion where you'll have the ability to unmute your microphones and provide input. Each room will have a city staff facilitator who will ask questions, keep time, and make sure everyone's input is heard. Afterward, we'll ask one person from each breakout room to share 1 or 2 topics that came up in the group discussion to the broader group. And all of your input will be recorded by city staff and taken into consideration during the plan development. The goals for the discussion specifically are to answer the questions, what specifically should the city do next year to address the community's priorities? As part of that, what are the community's needs right now? And what specific activities should the city fund to address those needs? And the facilitators will be there to help you remember what those priorities are, and to lead you through that discussion. So here I will pause in case anybody has any questions about the meeting process, the community discussion process, or general questions about our programming. And then we'll have 50 minutes to discuss in separate breakout rooms. All right, it looks like we do have one hand raised by Mary Haskin. Give me 1 second, let me make sure that. All right, Mary, you should be able to unmute your microphone now.
Hi, so I came in late on the discussion, so my apologies. I did hear that there's some monies allotted to parks. You were mentioning the large park. So I was curious, and I can ask this in the breakout room, beyond the large park, that's just kind of where my thought processes are, is the money's going into our local parks. I was born and raised here, and I remember participating at parks with different parks and recs people and that sort of thing. So that's my question. The focus is monies able to go into that sort of programming and having a staff member there for local kids and etc.?
Sure, yes. Thank you, Mary. I'm going to go ahead. Gavin, can we make sure? Okay, good. To answer your question, yes, absolutely. These funds can be used for park improvements, and also for programming at parks, with the caveat, with the requirement that all of these funds must benefit low and moderate income persons as defined by HUD. As you've heard through the presentation, and if not, if you missed that part, I'd be happy to send you that, and this presentation will be posted as well on our website. We've provided funding for many parks in the past. All of those parks are typically located within areas that are designated as low and moderate income, so they qualify for investments into the facilities and improvements on that basis. And then a lot of our services, like our after-school programs and our senior programs, those are offered at sites where the clientele is primarily low and moderate income. So if there is absolutely, that's something that the funds can be used for, and we would definitely encourage you to say more about that in your breakout room. Any other questions generally about the funding or the meeting process? All right, I think we've got everybody. Am I missing any hands, Gavin?
Yes, you are.
All right, it looks like we've got Nabil Kerfan.
Hello, my name is Nabil with Fresno Councilmember Tyler Maxwell's office. I just wanted to thank everyone for being part of this meeting. It's really important that we get the community involved. I understand that one of the neighborhoods that is up for consideration is near the Chestnut and Olive neighborhood. And we sent out some flyers to the neighbors in the area. If you received a flyer from Councilmember Maxwell, I just want to know that we really want this neighborhood to be involved in this process. Another great way you can get involved is to speak at the council meeting next Thursday. And if you would, and that's going to be really important in getting funding for rebuilding the roads in this neighborhood. So if you'd like to be involved, please reach out to me with your name, phone number, or email, and we will make sure we can help you get more involved, find new ways to really reinvest in our community. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Nabil. And yes, at the end of this conversation, when we come back together as a group, I'll show you the full schedule and all the ways that you can continue to participate. And absolutely, the January 28th City Council public hearing, I'll give you some information about that, and we would love your input at that time. All right, I don't see any other hands raised. So at this point, we will go ahead and split into breakout rooms. To that end, we will begin by identifying interpreters. If you could have individuals that are currently using your interpretation services, if you could have them raise their hand by either raising their hand in the Zoom platform, or if they're on their phones, by pressing *9. We'll make sure that all those folks stay in the main room, because that's where we can keep the interpretation services running for the breakout.
Okay, Ed, while they're doing that, can you help me identify the staff for the 3 rooms or 2 rooms, however many rooms we're looking at?
Yep, absolutely. So if you want to name the first room breakout room 1, let's put in that room Karen Jenks and Mage Tolles.
And not others. Okay, and staff for the second one?
And in the second one, let's put Thomas Morgan, will be the facilitator, and Susie Williams. And let's go ahead and put Thomas Gaffery in that room as well.
Okay. We're going to do a third room.
The third room will be, oh, sorry, there will only be the 2 breakout rooms. So we'll have this room and then the 2 breakout rooms. So we might want to keep some English speakers in the main room if there are, to reduce the number of folks going into the other rooms, to try to get an equal
We've
split.
got 2 people with their hand up that need to stay in the main room for interpretation purposes. We want to make sure that we only have 2 that we need to keep in the main room. So interpreters, can you, okay, now we've got 3.
Excellent. And anybody else who needs, oh, and I also want to note, I'm sorry, I meant to mention this at the beginning. If you are joined by both computer and by phone, it's possible that your audio and your video could end up in separate rooms if you haven't connected those. And the way you do that is down on your microphone where you see mute. There's a little up arrow and you can switch to phone audio. And if you use that function to activate your phone, it'll be connected to your video. But if you did not do that, and if you're logged in with both, please just participate in the room where you can hear, of course. If your video ends up in a different room, we'll apologize for that in advance. And with that, does everybody who requires interpretation services have their hand up? And then let's go ahead and start our breakout room. So Gavin, whenever you're ready.
Okay, just give me 1 second here.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else just raised their hand. I got to find them because I know I've already assigned them somewhere. Yeah, the rooms are opening, so hopefully we've got everybody assigned. We'll see here in a minute.
We will give everyone just a minute here to get into their room before we get started in the main room. Just give it a few more seconds here and then we'll get going. All right, and then Gavin, if you can help me watch the clock, let's pull everyone back together at 12:05. Okay, and let's go ahead and unmute everybody in the main room. I think I can do that.
Okay, they all have the ability to unmute themselves. You don't want to unmute everybody.
Right, okay, great. So everybody keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking, but you do now have the ability to unmute your microphones to speak. Okay, so with that, I will go ahead and get started with the community discussion. So I'll be leading the discussion in this room. Thank you all so much for joining and for participating. We'll get started with introductions. So you know what I'm going to do first here. This was something I did not do last time, but I'm going to share a slide with you that has some information about the individual priorities.
Edward?
Yep.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt. I just want to remind you to go into the English channel so that way I can do simultaneous interpreting and it'll go a lot faster.
Okay, got it. So we do still, for this section, we'll go into the English channel.
Yes, just for this section, unless you want me to do consecutive, but that requires for them to say their comment and then for me to interpret it. So it takes more time.
All right, so Gavin, if we do that, are we good? Okay, it looks like we don't have anybody joined by phone in this channel, so I think we should be okay. All right, so then what I'll do is, sorry, go ahead, Gavin.
Same thing we did last night. It worked well. So just
All right,
everybody
excellent.
turn on English interpretation if you're English speaking.
All right, so I will pause for just a moment. Everybody who is an English speaker in this, who can hear my voice right now, if you can go ahead and click on interpretation at the bottom of your screen and select English. And I'll give you a minute or so to come over here into this English channel. So can the interpreters still hear me? Are we still good? Okay, excellent. How about Marina, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Edward. Hi.
Excellent, so I think it's all working. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So the first, let me share my screen again here. So this screen just has the priorities that we've discussed previously, just to kind of refresh your memory as you're introducing yourself. So one at a time, let's introduce ourselves and then just provide me 1 or 2 minutes about what brought you here today, what you would like to learn more about, what priority area is most important to you. And with that, I will, how about we start with Marina?
Hi there. My name is Marina Haratunian. I'm Director of Compliance and Community Development at Habitat for Humanity. My areas of interest are affordable housing and public infrastructure and facilities, fair housing, community services, just about everything. But in Habitat, we address a lot of the issues that right now are on the slide, including the rehabilitation services of the existing housing stock. We also do neighborhood revitalization. We worked and partnered with city and a lot of nonprofits and for-profits here in the Valley to carry out the community development projects. And our concentration was in Southwest Fresno in 93706 zip code. And currently we do a lot of repair and rehab programs within the CDBG funding. And we also do neighborhood revitalization citywide and countywide. So I don't know if that answers your question,
Yes.
but that's, yeah.
Excellent, yeah, that's a great start. So what we'll do after introductions, we'll kind of see if there was something that bubbled to the surface in a lot of our introductions, and then we'll come back to that topic. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
So let's go next with, let's see. How about Estela Ortega?
secondary action, like I said, something, and sometimes even sí, buenos días a todos. Sí, la razón por la cual estoy aquí, me interesa mucho estas discusiones y reuniones es porque a mí me interesa tener una comunidad que sea más saludable para mi familia, para la comunidad. Pues ya que en estas comunidades somos muy, estamos mucho en desventaja porque las banquetas no están arregladas, no hay alumbramiento como debía que estar. Las calles no son seguras para andar caminando tampoco porque no hay carriles de bicicletas. También hay mucho vandalismo y también tenemos muchos lugares donde hay muchas licorerías En veces hay lugares donde están de 2 a 3 licorerías en el mismo lugar y cerca de las escuelas. Yo vivo también en donde están las vías del tren. Entonces aquí por este lugar, por la Floradora y la Cedar, muchos niños caminan porque van a la secundaria, van a la preparatoria y también van a la elementaria. Entonces son varias escuelas, como les he dicho, está la Roosevelt, Duncan, la McLean, la Yosemite, la Mayfair, la Leavenworth. Todas esas escuelas están conectadas en esta área, y es por donde caminan los niños. A mí me interesa que estos lugares, estas calles, estén arreglados para que los niños puedan caminar seguros a las escuelas también. Y también para que los ancianos caminen con sus sillas de ruedas seguros, porque ha habido accidentes también. A mí me interesa también tener caminos como para caminar, que sean caminos verdes para caminar al aire libre, y que también arreglen ese problema de los canales, que tienen mucha basura, están muy sucios, dan muy mal aspecto para toda la comunidad. Y también porque hay muchas personas que no tienen viviendas y están viviendo ahí. Todo esto para mí es muy importante, porque entonces no es una comunidad muy saludable. Hay mucha contaminación. Estamos sufriendo de mucha contaminación también. Ese es mi comentario y esa es la razón por la que estoy aquí. Me interesa mucho que se haga un cambio y espero que ustedes inviertan en las cosas que más necesitamos nosotros en esta comunidad. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Estela. I'm just going to jot down a couple things here. Great. Okay, and how about Cesar Casamayor?
Before
Yes,
that, just to say, is there a synopsis as to what was said? You might have heard it yourself for the translation, but we as the interpreters for ASL did not hear the English. So can there be a synopsis of what was stated so that the deaf participant will understand? We were just waiting.
Oh, so you were not able to hear the interpreter's translation into English?
No, I heard the Spanish. It was beautiful.
Oh, okay. Was there, do we have Gavin in the main channel? Do you know why that might be?
She doesn't have her interpretation on for English. That would be why she wouldn't hear it.
Okay,
Okay,
got
let me
it.
see. Okay.
But I will be, I'll be happy to summarize.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and if we could, everybody who's not either, everybody listening to me right now should either be in the Spanish, Hmong, or English interpretation channel.
Edward,
sure.
can I chime in here? The reason why she won't be able to hear the interpretation is because she herself is in a channel, isn't she?
No, she's
no.
not.
I just pressed it for English.
Excellent. Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, that was
And
my
then I have a quick question as well.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had to leave the other group and I now can't get back to it. Is there someone who's available to send me back to the group I was in?
Do you remember which group you were in by chance, Andy?
I think it was Breakout Room 1.
Okay, I'm going to send you there. If that isn't the one,
Okay.
just come back and I'll send you the other one.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, great. So I'll summarize real quickly. What I heard Estela say was really interested in healthier communities, sidewalks, light, safety. A lot of liquor stores near schools are an issue. Kids, dangerous conditions for children walking near Roosevelt, Lincoln, McLean, Leavenworth, where all these kids walk through. So we're really looking at being able to safely walk to their schools, and as well as elderly persons in their wheelchairs. Green paths and canals are dirty, green paths are also a need in the neighborhood. and a lot of the canals are dirty, and that there are a lot of homeless people living nearby there in these sort of contaminated conditions. And then Estela really emphasized that her desire to see that these funds get invested in those areas that are most needed. Did I do you justice,
Oh, yes.
Estela?
Thank
Did that
you.
sound good? All right.
Hello.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, so let's go next to, how about Dua Lee? With a brief introduction. And any comments? 1 or 2 minutes. That's D. Oops, sorry, go ahead. Oh, sorry, I was just flipping back down through my list and I missed you. All right, sorry, Cesar, if you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself in 1 to 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Edward, for the opportunity. Good morning. My name is Cesar Casamayor. I am a community organizer, activist, advocate. My concerns are always in regards to youth. I see that we have very low access for housing for homeless youth. I know that on T Street at the EOC, it only sits like eight youth, and then they're referred to homes like group homes that many times are very limited and very restrictive, especially when youth work and stuff like that. So I think that's a big need that we need in our communities. We need to be able to have better access to capital for entrepreneurship, not just job skills and employment training. We actually need access to capital. So our folks in the community who've been impacted, especially by the war on drugs and poverty and disenfranchisement and not having access to housing, not just to rent, but rent to own. So I see that there's going to be opportunities in the near future for with opportunity zones. Within these opportunity zones, I hope that the city looks into creating more rent to own opportunities for folks of low income, not just for folks that work, but also for some recipients that are in Section 8 that can get out of that by having some type of capital so they can have housing and use that and beautify the neighborhood as people have more ownership, people feel more inclined to take care of the property. So for me, those are the biggest issues that I see in the community and the needs that we have, specifically with the mindset and the perspective of what young people have. We definitely need more access to programs, especially with this big giant epidemic. We're seeing a lot of youth play basketball in the parks with no PPE. And you're not going to be able to stop all these kids that are playing at the parks. I see them kids playing in Frank H. I see kids playing in Chestnut and Belmont, or Morton Riley, or Romaine Park, all the parks in our cities. And I think there needs to be better ways of keeping young people safe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cesar. All right, I think I called next on, so I'm flipping through my list here. Did we lose Dua, D-O-U-A, Lee?
Nhớ rằng tận ta khuya đùa. Cô chỉ mua lúa hay liền.
I hear
Edward,
Hmong,
Is
not
that
English.
Hi, Laura. I can hear your Hmong, but not your English interpretation.
You would have to switch to the Hmong channel now to hear her English interpretation. Just like you did with Spanish, now you'd have to switch to Hmong to hear the Hmong translation. Hear me, Ed?
I do, yeah. I didn't need to switch to the Spanish channel to hear.
You don't need to switch. You just have to be on the English channel. Laura has to switch to English so that way she can simultaneously interpret the Hmong. Laura, did you hear that?
Okay.
I did hear, and I'm clicking on to the English channel. And I believe she said, my name is Dua. I don't have any comments.
Okay, great. Well, we'll come back after all the introductions, and if you'd like to provide any other input, we would absolutely love to receive it. All right, let's see. How about Zoraida Valdez Rodriguez?
Hey, Mr. Edward, I apologize. Can I add one more
If you can wait for just a few minutes.
Sure. Thank you. Okay.
Yep, I will come back to you.
Okay. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, I'll start again. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my name is Zoraida Valdez Rodriguez. I work for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Service Center, DHHSC, the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Service Center, and I am an advocate for many people in the community. The few things that, of course, we struggle with in our community with the clients that I serve are apartments for housing, affordable housing, because they have to be able to afford the fees like the deposits, and it could be 2 times or 3 times more than what they earn. So their income is limited and would not fit into their budget. So they definitely are low income restricted. And then the fees that often go with it for the housing requests, or also for the fees that are associated with that. So they end up in a bind or homeless. So we're hoping that we can resolve those situations. Then the other thing that I've noticed is that just to rephrase, we sometimes try to place people, and often the clients end up living on the street because their needs are not fully met. And so the homeless community has grown, and sometimes it's even on a temporary basis where we're trying to find housing, and we can do so right away. And we'd like to do more of that. So, and then another issue is that when our consumers apply for apartments, they're often declined because of their deafness. So there are some discrimination issues that still exist here in Fresno. So hopefully we'll be able to stop or greatly reduce that discrimination. And so I hope that's clear in terms of our goals.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cesar, if we can come back to you for just 1 minute, and then we want to make sure we get comments from everyone else too. I think we're almost there, but go ahead and.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Edwards. So one of my biggest issues that I see in our community is that we have very poor lack of engagement and participation from community. So I hope that the city creates better participatory processes to have more input from community that don't require citizenship to be able to have a say-so in voting for programming or things that the city is going to be introducing and providing for our community. We continue to rely on the same, I can count them by my hand, the same folks to be determining what are the needs and what are the asks and demands of our community without really having a majority consensus from the community. And the only way that I feel that we can change that is by having more participatory processes in making decisions where people can have a say-so in a more convenient way, where you can have community centers be those places where people can go and find out the ideas that we're discussing today, for example. I'm really, really hoping that this is taken very seriously, because we continue to allow a handful of people make decisions for the community that sometimes don't have the best interests or are detached from the most urgent and important needs in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that input. All right, let me see how about Keshia Thomas?
Hi, and thank you for the invitation. I am a couple things. I am a board member for Fresno Unified School District, and I'm executive director for Fresno Career Development Institute. I have a few issues, and they stem around safe parks and facilities for our kids. We need a way to be able to keep the parks clean, number one, because many of the parks in West Fresno, I live in West Fresno, they are consumed by people who are homeless. There's needles. It's just a plethora of things in which if our kids were to go play at the park, they would be in harm's way, and to keep them secure. So that's one of the issues here in West Fresno, besides some that have already been mentioned. We also need, we used to have student-driven work programs where our kids could go to work in the summertime to keep them out of trouble and so on and so forth. And we no longer have those because of the economy. So I would like to figure out a way to engage our kids in work programs where they can start making money, and maybe that would save them from some of those naughty things that they tend to do when they're not being supervised. Lastly, one of the infrastructures and facilities that I have a complaint about is the Sunset School area. Sunset School has been looking to get sidewalks put down for the safety of their kids for years. And it's continued to be pushed either as the county or as the city, and there's no one really taking responsibility for that issue. And that's another place that really needs help in providing safety for our kids. And with that, I yield my time and I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Nina Bailey.
Sorry, thank you for giving me a second. I needed to take my phone off of mute.
You bet.
My name is Nina Bailey. I am the Executive Director for Southwest Fresno Development Corporation. Our primary focus happens to be on housing and development for like affordable housing and mostly the missing middle. We definitely have a need for people who want to remain on that side of town. We cover the 93706 zip code. But the infrastructure may not be in place that allows them per se to get to work. So we only have one real bus route that comes kind of out from downtown and then sort of through past Edison High School and then around, then to come northbound. So having, some added bus loops there would be very important within the neighborhood. Additionally, services like small businesses, everything from coffee shops to laundry services or dry cleaning, things that are just really lacking in the area because it's been disinvested in for such a long period of time. So our organization primarily looks at on how we can help bring economic development as well as foster entrepreneurship. And of course, the fact that, our area has about 67% rentership over home ownership means that wealth transfer is not likely to happen there. So how we can collaborate with the city and the housing authority on building, like Cesar was saying, some form of rent to own style of housing that would allow people who want to remain in the neighborhood, maybe can't afford to move across town or what have you, the opportunity to build equity and then be able to leverage that and or pass that down from an intergenerational wealth vantage point. So those are our major concerns. We are looking now to purchase some of the housing stock that is in the area. We're looking to do some rehabilitation, which would at least be able to start that process. And so projects that are, or information related to that is what we're mostly focused on. And I will yield whatever remaining time I have. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And you mentioned a zip code that I missed when you were talking about the bus route.
93706 is all that we so Southwest Fresno is all that we manage and oversee at this point. So everything south of downtown and west of the 41.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. How about Janice?
Hi, good morning.
Good
I
morning.
am here along with Nina Bailey, who you just heard from with Southwest Fresno CDC. And I'm a grant writer with their organization, and I have nothing further to offer. I think that she covered it very well. So thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Thank you for coming. And when we come back together as a group, I'll give you some more information about the application process.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. How about Marla Williams?
Good morning. Thank you. I do not have any comments at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marla. Did I miss anybody? I'll pause for just a minute and make sure I've got my technology in order and I didn't miss any of you. So if I did, please go ahead and take yourself off mute and give me a 1 to 2 minute introduction. All right, I think we have spoken with everybody. Okay, now, typically at this time, I like to go to the item, talk about the in focus priority that seemed to be raised more frequently than others. However, in this conversation, we have introduced a lot of different ideas. So I will, let's see, I think let's start with community services. And the reason I think we should start there is because I'm not sure that we've heard about it as much as some of the other activities. So again, I'll remind you about the sorts of activities we can fund. Senior programs, youth programs like recreation after school, programs for folks suffering from substance abuse, victims of domestic violence, child care programs, employment training, job skills training, etc. So we can only spend about 15% because of our HUD, our regulations on our money on things that are classified as services. But if there's anything in particular in that category that you think we need more than others to use this limited funding for, I'd like to just kind of open it up.
Is there a way, Edward, to find out what's the breakdown? For example, like how much goes for the elderly, how much goes to youth, how much goes to housing, you know, in regards of services? Is there a way to find out what would be the breakdown of that?
We have never prepared a breakdown like that. And I'll tell you, part of the reason why is because it's not as much money as it may seem to be. Because it's 15% of one of our grants that qualifies for that funding. I'm doing a really quick calculation. This isn't perfect by any means, but you could think of that to mean approximately $1 million a year. And that funds historically 10 after-school programs from the Parks Department and 7 senior programs from the Parks Department. And then last year, after funding those programs because of the increases in minimum wage and whatnot, just to sustain those programs, we actually only had about $160,000 left to offer to community-based organizations. And from those organizations, we selected, based on the scores, the Boys and Girls Club to operate their youth programs in 2 centers. And the Fresno Area Hispanic Foundation for their entrepreneurship technical assistance program, and Stone Soup, which offered a program for adults connecting them to services, community services through their Family Forward program. So I would say generally the majority of the funding does tend to go towards youth, and then the next highest category would probably be seniors. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm just more like, for example, I know that like West Fresno is very neglected, is very like poorly sought after or overseen with like love and care, like other parts that I see. And so I wonder about when we talk about services, like for example, like the graffiti. I've been seeing graffiti for the past 2 years in the same spot over at the Mariella Brown Center, by the basketball courts that's got all weeded up. People haven't worked on that for years. So I just wonder, like when we talk about services, I know the services in the center, but on regards of on beautifying, like for example, cleanups, how often do they happen, right? On regards of like having services for parks, how often does those happen in the south side, specifically on the west side? Because those are the ones most I feel neglected. We still having arguments about Hyde Park being a park built on top of a landfill. Can't even play there. It's got too many hills and all types of, contamination there, but it's considered a park. So I don't know how the city gets away with that on regards of being able to even provide services at that spot, because it's not healthy. So it will be good to have an understanding on how it's broken down, because we'll be able to better identify how neglected our communities are, especially where we have a concentration of African Americans living there.
Sure. Okay, that's great input.
Edward, can I respond to Cesar?
Yes.
Okay.
Who is that
Sorry.
speaking?
This is Marla. I apologize. I had some training going on, so I missed the first part of the meeting. My name is Marla Williams. I am a staff assistant with the Code Enforcement Rental Housing Unit of the City Attorney's Office. And in regards to some of the issues that Cesar was mentioning, unfortunately, those fall on other departments within the city. So like keeping up the park as far as weeds and graffiti, those are actually two different departments with the city. But if you see things like that and you report it, you can use the Fresco app, or you can call into code enforcement, either one, and those issues will get reported to the correct department and then getting taken care of from there.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Marla. I'm aware that I believe a resident had called from my understanding, and they haven't come and fixed it.
And that was about the Mariella Brown specifically?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But the basketball courts.
I will make a note and get that over to our 311 center and have them forward that to the graffiti team.
For sure, I think.
Okay.
Thank you, Marla, and thank you, Cesar. I do want to note the funding that we have here that we're discussing today. It's very specific, the types of activities that it can fund. But I will make sure you know your entire comment with regard to graffiti, beautification, Hyde Park, for example, as you pointed out, if we were to use any of the federal entitlement funds on Hyde Park, that would need to go through a full environmental assessment per federal regulations, for example. But I will make sure that we get this information. If we can't get it into the plan in terms of a response, we'll get it to the right folks. All right. Anybody else with any comments specific? We were talking about community services, or if you'd like to respond to anything else that came up in Cesar's comment or in anyone else's.
Hi, this is Janice Edward. So with regards to the community services, you stated that the $1 million first funds the Parks and Recs Department, and then there's about $100,000 left over roughly to give out to community-based organizations or local nonprofits. So is this information known ahead of time? Like, would organizations know that they're really only applying for about $100,000 so that they could know to appropriately submit applications, that they're not asking for $200,000 or $300,000 when there's only $100,000 to bid for?
That's a great question, Janice. The way that we have done it in the past is when we release that notice of funding availability, at that point, we will have identified how much of that funding will kind of be eligible for internal versus external. That doesn't mean that that's the way it has to be. And in fact, your input today is critical to help us understand how you would like the funds to be invested. So I can't give you a 100% certainty answer about how it will be issued this year, but I can tell you that when we issue that notice of funding availability, we will make sure that it's clear whether you are competing with other community-based organizations for, say, $160,000, or if you're competing with community-based organizations and city departments for, $1 million. It will be clear in the criteria when we issue the NOFA.
Sounds good. And then are these funds typically, do they have match requirements, or are there no match requirements for these particular opportunities?
Yes. So it depends on the funding source. There are 4 federal grants, and as of right now, we have a waiver because of the economic conditions in Fresno on one of those funding sources that would normally have a match requirement. That's our Home Investment Partnerships money. But the Emergency Solutions Grant program, that's the program that funds many of our homeless services. That one has a dollar-for-dollar match requirement. That's the community services money that we typically fund from the Community Development Block Grant. That does not have a match requirement. The public infrastructure and facilities money usually comes from that same CDBG funding. That doesn't have a match requirement either. So it does depend on the funding source. But to my knowledge, I think the only one that really is the homelessness funding. That's specifically out of that one bucket. It doesn't mean we could fund homeless services out of a source that doesn't have a match requirement too. So.
Gotcha. Okay. And then you said even when it is, no, I understand. I'm following along. So even when there is a match requirement, you can request a waiver, and there's a process for that.
I'll say the city has a waiver for one of our funding sources. As of right now, we don't have word from HUD on any additional waivers that they'll make available. That being said, they have been issuing them left and right on account of the coronavirus. Sorry, I had a little bit of feedback there. But
that's okay. Okay, so I'm understanding that the waiver is really requested by the city to waive the match requirements from the federal government, not the community organizations are requesting the waiver to the city.
Right, and if we get the waiver, if we can get the waiver, we will, and if we do, we'll pass that
on to the community organizations.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Can I have a follow-up with that? Because thank you, Ms. Janice, for bringing it up, because I think it's very important. We have a lot of like single-based issue organizations that will never be able to access funds because the way that the process is to get the funds, they don't meet it. So again, this is why we have such a division in our community, where you have community organizations that are like an umbrella that do multiple services, and the ones that are more focused on that issue, for example, housing will be one, right, are dismissed in the sense of not being able to compete for the funds or to do the work because they're not in the same economic bracket as some of these well-established organizations. So there needs to be a better way of allowing for more grassroots organizers and organizations to be able to access funds so they can do the work that many of the big nonprofit organizations get the funding for, but they don't have enough attention to community and are engaged in that strength with community at the grassroots level. I think there needs to be a strong push for allowing for more, I would say, friendly competition or whatever you want to call it, but there needs to be more opportunities to enter the nonprofit sector for many community folks that are doing the work on our own dime. Like, for example, I'll tell you right now, Tough Kids Outreach is a young organization. They just cleaned up Mariella Brown Center, whoever's on the west side. You can go to Mariella Brown Center. They're going to be doing programming over there to keep kids safe and to do something, because that's one of the parts that's neglected. Nobody doing nothing out there. So small things like that, small groups do exist in our communities, but they have to compete against the bigger ones like Fresno Street Saints, Stop the Violence, things like organizations like that are coming up. Stop the Violence is one organization that's coming up. So I apologize for rambling on, but I think it's very important to really take into account the smaller organizations that are being left out in the conversation on what other needs are because of the way that the system is set up on how to get access to funds.
That's a great input. Thank you. And we have, I will note, in the past, one of the things that we can do with one of our funding sources is offer capacity building grants, which have slightly more, less restrictive sort of monitoring criteria, in terms of usually when we, I guess in that case, let me phrase it this way, that the organization itself is kind of the beneficiary, and growing that organization helps benefit the low and moderate income community over time. The last organization that I'm aware of who received a capacity building grant was the Lowell Community Development Corporation. So if we were able to possibly set aside funding for that technical assistance for capacity building in smaller organizations, would that be something that the folks in the room think we should prioritize?
Yes, that's definitely needed, brother. We need that big time.
Ed, I have a question kind of in connection to what Cesar is mentioning. Because we work with organizations that do tend to be smaller, is there anything within these applications that would prevent these organizations from teaming up? Like, let's say, Southwest may have a little bit more capacity and a little bit more resources, and I was to partner with, say, Cesar on a particular style of grant that obviously would benefit him. Let's say it's youth development, and while we have some youth built in, that is more his area of expertise. Would there be opportunities for organizations to work together in that way, instead of one just applying and there's more of a competition? We work together and everybody gets a piece of the pie that is necessary to make their situation work. Is there any such method for that?
I really, really want to say yes, because I think there is. I'm not sure exactly how it would be technically structured.
Okay.
But it's something we could definitely look into. And in particular, if we could find a way to provide technical assistance to that end.
Right. Right. So let's say that we're doing, under what he's talking about, there would be, it's more community revitalization because there's a cleanup component, which obviously, since that's my jurisdiction, I would be concerned with as well. But perhaps they have more bodies that are grassroots wise oriented, and we have more of the TA in place to be able to write the grant, then, but it benefits us both. It seems like, one organization might be the lead organization, and maybe there's three of us that need to work together, and each of us need the funds. We would stand a better chance of having checked all the boxes per se on your end than we would on our own.
It would need to be, it would need to meet a single national, what we call a national objective. This is getting into very HUD language.
Okay, gotcha.
But if it were a single program with multiple people delivering it,
yes,
I think we could probably find a way to make that work.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, and I will definitely look into that for you. Okay, any other comments or?
Yes, I wanted to add something as well, Edward. This is Marina with Habitat for Humanity. I also wanted to kind of, start the conversation around mobile homes and rehabilitation and repair of mobile homes. If we're talking about affordable housing, that's the lowest, point of entry into a home ownership. And I do not believe there has been a commitment of any funding to do this citywide. And there are a lot of mobile home parks that are in dire need of investment. And when we talk about mobile homes, we talk about a population of potentially, older adults. And just considering the manufacturing standards of mobile homes, their life is considered to be, much less than what they actually are right now. So just earmarking funding that will help organizations as us, to do work that benefits, because we are also touching upon accessibility and safety, safe entrance into and out of houses and mobile homes. It's a major issue when we talk to our senior population. So, and also definitely, beautification and revitalization efforts citywide. There's a lot of work that could be done together with other nonprofits and partnering with the city, but I see a major gap in the referral system. You have access to a lot of households that are in need of anything from minor to critical repair. So I think that establishing that sound system of referrals between the agencies is something that we can hopefully achieve.
Interesting. So in that you mean sort of folks who might be lower moderate income and need home repairs specifically?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yes.
Thank you for that feedback. And I will note real quick, we did get some funding approved for mobile home rehabilitation as part of our permanent local housing allocation, which is not the topic of today's conversation, but that's a new source of state funding that will create kind of a permanent flow of funds for housing and homelessness initiatives. And I want to say that 10% of the 5-year allocation was committed to rehabilitation of owner-occupied homes focused on activities that are not currently eligible under city programs, because mobile homes are very hard to fund through the federal entitlement dollars.
Right.
We are waiting to get our agreement from the state still on that funding. But once we do, we expect to be releasing a notice of funding availability for that mobile home rehabilitation program.
Great, we'll stay tuned.
All right, any other, so before I open it back up, we've got just about 2 minutes left. Is there anybody in the room who would like to speak, present a summary of our conversation? I know it's going to be very challenging to the broader group when we reconvene. And if you want, you could just present a couple, just 1 or 2 things that we discussed today that came up multiple times, maybe affordable housing. All right, well, if anybody wants to volunteer between now and when we reconvene, let me know. Otherwise, I'll do my best to summarize. This has been a very, very good conversation, brought up a lot of different topics. So with the time we have left, is there anyone else who has any final thoughts or things that you didn't get to say so far?
Edward, could you talk a little bit, and you may talk about this in the main group, but just in the short time that we have, if you could talk about, we talked a lot about community services. Could you talk a little bit about the affordable housing
Sure.
and maybe what the city may be looking at as viable proposed programs and or the funding amount that may be available for that program?
Sure. So affordable housing is a very strong focus right now. And historically, the funding that we're talking about today, the HUD Entitlement Funding, and Gavin, if you can hear me, if we can start the countdown timer for the reconvening. Sorry, just want to get that. So historically, the most of the funding for the city the city would use to subsidize affordable housing development came from the programs we're discussing today. And that's clearly not enough. In this bucket, we have the Home Investment Partnerships Program, usually somewhere around $2 million with about, I want to say, I'm not sure about the breakdown, but part of that is set aside for community housing development organizations like Habitat for Humanity and self-help enterprises, folks like that, to develop affordable housing. So about 2 million would go to affordable housing development, and then another portion would go for tenant-based rental assistance. We have, in the past year since I've been here, identified substantially more funding by reprogramming program income and community development block grant income, as well as the new permanent local housing allocation. And we're also pursuing, we received approval for an application from the state that we'll be using to help develop an affordable housing trust fund application. So there's a lot in the works right now, but historically the way it would work is these federal entitlement funds, we would issue a notice of funding availability to affordable housing developers. And that really would be for gap financing to subsidize specifically a number of units within their development, or in the case of, say, a Habitat for Humanity, subsidizing the development of a property and possibly helping to write down the purchasing costs for the prospective homeowner. So those are the ways that we've typically done it. We're currently looking to try to increase the amount of funding available in that pipeline. But that application, you'll see in a minute, will be released on May 17th this year. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Edward, in regards to that, can I add something as well?
Absolutely.
We're talking about funding here, but also, one of the major challenges in securing affordable housing units is land. Is there anything considered or discussed about that, affordable land for affordable units?
I'll note that as a comment, because we can use, the funds can be used for acquisition and disposition of land. Again, there are a limited number of funds, right? And any city-owned land is, of course, subject now to the new state requirements that it first be considered for affordable housing developments before being used for any other purpose as well. But it's well noted that land is a critical part of this puzzle as well. All right, and
I'll just mention, Edward, that it's part of our work plan for the coming year to work with our long-range planning folks that are responsible for the housing area element to assess the feasibility of some of the vacant parcels that are within the city as the affordable housing development opportunities. And we're particularly interested, because of the work last year by many of the people that are participating in this and others, that there are analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, that the city become more proactive in developing affordable housing and opportunity zones. So we're going to pay particular attention to vacant land and opportunity zones of the city. And
And I'll note, you mean areas of opportunity, right?
Areas of opportunities,
Right,
not to
then-
be confused with the
Yeah.
federal opportunity. I realized what I did. We used
Very
to call
different, very different things for the careful listener.
Yeah.
All right, now, and that's Housing Manager Tom Morgan. I just want to interject real quick. Gavin, do we need to, the folks who were in the main room, do we need to switch back to the main audio channel?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, all right, so English speakers from our main breakout room, if you can go ahead and turn your interpretation off so that we can communicate in the main channel, and I will join you there momentarily. Okay, so I am going to pause for just a second and wait until I can see my interpreters give me a thumbs up. Can you hear me? Excellent. And our other facilitators, Karen Jenks, Tom Morgan, are we looking, everybody can hear my voice?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yes,
Excellent.
I can, Edward.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's continue. All right, so thank you everybody so much for your participation today. We'll now spend just a few minutes with each group asking for one person from your group to kind of summarize some of the topics that you raised in your group. So with that, I will, let's go to Karen Jenks. Do you have a volunteer to speak for your group?
I do. Brandy was kind enough to sort of voluntold, but she said she was willing to.
Okay, well, I was in the middle of trying to remember everything and write notes because usually I write notes, but this time around I was, thinking through things. So I'll try to remember as best I can. So some of the things we mentioned, the need to address parks and work on, making them usable, and working on fixing them up more, being more like user friendly and stuff, and including fixing up someone addressed about the idea of not only the parks themselves, but also the roadways for bike riders and pedestrians to be fixed up, to be more bicycle friendly and whatnot, because of the idea that if those things are not addressed, it impedes people actually being able to access those things as pedestrians or bicyclists, to make things more, to look at things in North Fresno as far as being inclusive. For West, there was mentioned about the idea of infrastructures of stores and resources, especially in West Fresno area, west of the 99, to ensure that we have, to address the food desert that we have in those areas, the lack of stores and resources, and that resources and services not only come there, but that they actually are based in these communities. And I added that with those who are going into the housing, homeless housing in Parkway, and the transformation of the Parkway to meet with those in the community and in the homeless community that are moving into there, and addressing the needs and addressing the infrastructure needs and resource needed there. We mentioned about having more community input, in every neighborhood partnership mentioned about doing their, Andrew mentioned about walking tours and going door to door, getting input from the community. We mentioned also including others like specific working with youth to continue to get their voice, to be able to address needs that we may not miss, and with the unsheltered and homeless community to get their needs, to recognize the needs that we have in the community, and also financial literacy for those who are seeking housing, those who are in housing, as far as low income, having affordable housing, not only increasing that, but also increasing financial literacy and assistance for people to be able to understand, so that they can, those who are renting, as well as renters, to be able to stay in, to be able to assist them through all those things that might impede them from being able to successfully access affordable housing and remain in housing. And I'm not sure if there's other, and also, I mean, I mentioned about the idea of continuing to look at and needs is, well, I guess that was all addressed. Is there anything I missed? I feel like I was still doing notes. Anyone
No, I
else
think
from my
that was
team?
good.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Brandy. All
Oh,
right.
and I want to add, I was trying to think something as far as the with the homeless, because that was a major thing that people mentioned is we mentioned the idea of looking at more really looking with their assistance at things that they need and alternatives, not only like looking at more successful housing and how to do that, but also things as far as safe camps and tiny houses, and also engaging the community in positive education about those who are homeless and including them in there to be able to overcome some of the barriers that we've been experiencing in coming up with solutions that includes having the those who are unsheltered be part of the conversation and brought to the table. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Yes, great. Sorry, just finishing up my note about your comment. Got it. Thank you. Tom Morgan, how about your group? Do you have a volunteer?
Yes, we have Carla from our group that has volunteered. Carla? You know, I'm no longer seeing, let me flip the screen. I'm no longer seeing her name on the screen. Maybe we lost her. Hopefully not in the transition. Gabriel, you had several ideas and were very passionate about what you were talking about. Would you mind reporting out for the group, or at least getting it started?
Okay. Okay, let me just say this, that what the number one thing that everybody was kind of worried about in services that they want is the housing, homeless, not finding what type of housing for them, and that was a priority. Parks and employment. Some of the ideas were that that I had were that if you find housing for the homeless, accountability for the homeless, because if one thing that's constant in any plan is that the mental health or the addiction is taken to no matter where they're housed at. So you have to have services for them. It's not fair to them, or you'll be repeating this process over again down the road. Just to let you know that I have 15 years of mental health services. I work from a mental health worker. I've done suicide watches. I've done placement, so forth. And we've transitioned people to these type of places in San Diego, California. From an inpatient psychiatric unit. So that's some of the things that that have to happen. One of the things that my organization works on is employment services, vocational training. A lot of these affordable housing units that are being built that we have a vocational training for that the local kids, local adults, not only the kids growing out of high school, but some of the 20s, 30s that can still work in that type of environment to build green type homes and to close the gap on housing. Let me see. I'm just shooting off the hip, you guys, so I'm sorry if it's coming from all over. And parks parks are fixed in all areas. Every area is important that they have green space because it's a prevention model. You can have services, so forth. One of the things that was talked about is that if we do offer these services, that it's not concentrated to one part of town, that we share the services. In other words, they can go to the different zip codes, districts of the city council, and not just towards the downtown area. The other thing is the seeking assistance and applying for the types of money and so forth, and reaching out to the community for the wants and needs. And they talked about some other stuff, but that's all I can come up with. I'm sorry that it's so mixed up.
No, don't be sorry. We had a very involved conversation with a lot of different topics in our room as well. So Thank you. I've noted all of your input down. We really appreciate it, Gabriel.
Gabriel really did a good job. We did talk a little bit, Ed, about infrastructure and some of the challenges there. And I won't take up more time than that, but I certainly in Susie's notes that she was scribing and the feedback I can add, we can add that to part of the documentation of the dialogue this morning.
Great, thank you. I will very quickly, because I know we're kind of running out of time today. Brandy, it looks like you have your hand up. Did you have a question?
Yeah, not a question. I wanted to add to that. I mean, we did speak a lot about the homeless thing, and I realized that another thing that someone had mentioned that I overlooked was the idea of looking at the different needs regarding addressing homelessness prevention and housing for based on different. For one of our people addressed that for the LGBTQ community, and addressing investing more in those things, recognize the needs that, you know, some of that and the issue that, you know, people feel unsafe in the shelters and in different housing situations, and making sure that we attend to those needs, as well as the lack of, you know, youth shelters and whatnot. So we definitely spoke a lot about what was mentioned in the other group as far as having, you know, a housing with services to ensure people's success, like what the Villages on Blackstone is doing. So I appreciate the conversation on the other thing. But.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, now from our group, I will try to very quickly summarize, and then if anyone in my group would like to add, feel free to do so. So we talked a lot about affordable housing, and in particular, we raised the issue of mobile homes and rehabilitation of mobile homes. That was one of the issues that we discussed. So I'm getting some feedback on a microphone. Okay, great. We talked about having healthier communities with sidewalks, lights, safety on crosswalks for children that are walking to and from school. We have several examples from specific neighborhoods that we wrote down. We talked about a lack of green paths, about an issue with trash accumulation and cleanliness. We talked about entrepreneurship and support for entrepreneurs and developing more resources beyond just job training with potentially even capital. I know this funding might not be qualifying for that, but very important need in the community that we identified that we'll definitely pass along. We talked about better engagement, the city finding better ways and participating in better ways of hearing in a more consistent fashion the needs of the community and getting them involved, possibly even offering technical assistance or more technical assistance to organizations that are looking to possibly collaborate with each other to apply for funds. We had a couple ideas about that. We talked about affordable housing with regard to discrimination, people potentially being discriminated against on the basis of disability when applying for apartments. And we talked about a lot of other things. I don't want to leave off anybody's important input. We talked about specific areas that need some more transportation assistance. And I think that's a lot of what we discussed. If I missed anything important, I'll invite anybody from my group to raise their hand. I know there were many more important things, so I've got all that written down here. Okay, great. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and, I think we've got one hand up. Is that Brandy? Did you have one more comment?
Yeah, sorry, I keep remembering things afterwards because some of the things were my comments and I wasn't taking notes on them. But with the affordable housing, I think the idea of, you know, ensuring that existing housing is safe and continuing accountability for renters, as well as addressing issues as far as people having difficulty being able to find housing with housing vouchers, with some resistance and issues regarding those who are renting, and overcoming those things so that those who are on housing, who get housing vouchers, are able to find safe housing with responsible renters. Yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one more time because I want to make sure you know how to stay involved in this process, since we're just about out of time. Let me get everything under control here. There we go. All right. So to stay involved in this process, I'll show you this schedule first. So this is the schedule of the development and approval for the annual action plan. Coming up next, we will have a City Council Community Needs public hearing on January 28th at 10:05 a.m. or thereafter. We know sometimes with these timed items with City Council, it might not be exactly at 10:05 a.m., but that's when we'll have it on the schedule for. And we absolutely want to encourage each and every one of you, if you have a comment to make that comment in front of City Council at the Community Needs public hearing on January 28th at 10:05 a.m. Comments submitted during the hearing are important, not only because they'll officially be recorded with the plan, but also those comments will be considered by the City Council, which must approve the final plan before we submit it to HUD. Following that hearing, we will prepare the notice of funding availability, which will be posted to our website and include instructions on how community organizations and units of government can apply for funding. We'll be announcing technical assistance webinars and opportunities for organizations to receive support in preparing their applications. And those webinars are expected to occur the week ending February 19th, 2021. We encourage you to visit www.fresno.gov/housing or to email hcdd@fresno.gov for more information on those webinar opportunities. Applications will be due on March 5th, after which staff will review the applications and score them according to the criteria, which will be published with the notice of funding availability. We'll review those applications with an ad hoc committee of the City Council and prepare the annual action plan at that point, which will be published for comment on March 19th, 2021. Residents can then submit comment on the written plan through April 20th, 2021, and there will also be one final public hearing on April 22nd, 2021, where you can provide additional comment before City Council, after which they'll consider adoption of that final plan, which is due to HUD, come rain or shine, on May 15th, 2021. Note that the Affordable Housing Development and Substantial Rehabilitation NOFA is released on a different timeline than that main NOFA. And that will, and when I say NOFA, I'm not sure if I said that that's our Notice of Funding Availability, which will invite folks to apply. And the one for affordable housing will be released on May 17th and be due on July 5th. We also expect, similar to last year, that the Fair Housing Services NOFA, which is undergoing revision, will be on a different timeline. So stay tuned if you're interested or know someone who's interested in applying for funding through the Fair Housing Services allocation. We will be announcing at a future time the timeline for that NOFA application window. We welcome and encourage all input. The key ways that you can provide that input are, as I said before, I'll reiterate, please come to the City Council public hearing, January 28th at 10:05 a.m. or thereaafter. You'll find instructions on how to participate at fresno.legistar.com/calendar.aspx. And I will drop these links into the chat window right when I finish speaking for anybody that would like to grab those. You can also submit input by web survey at surveymonkey.com/r/COF-action21, or you can submit input by email to hcdd@fresno.gov, by phone to 559-621-8300, by touch to type at 621-8721 or by fax to 457-1579. All right, and with that, I'm gonna, before I let you all go, I'm gonna go get those links and put them in the chat box in case anybody wants to click on them right now. And in the meantime, I will say thank you everybody for joining today. Thank you for your feedback, for your engagement and participation. We had some really great conversations, and we hope to continue to hear from you as we continue on this process. I know we went right up until the minute. I will hang around for about 5 more minutes in case anybody has any additional questions. And everybody that needs to leave immediately, I will say thank you and have a great day. All right, looks like I don't see any questions. So I think, Gavin, we are good to stop the recording and